In 1942, the Japanese Zero ruled the skies. American pilots called it unbeatable until fate delivered a captured Zero into U.S. hands. One daring test pilot took it up, risking his life to unlock its secrets. What he discovered would transform the F6F Hellcat into the deadliest fighter of the Pacific, with a kill ratio no one thought possible. This is the untold story of how a single flight changed the course of World War II. In the early days of World War II, the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 was the terror of the Pacific. Fast, agile, and seemingly invincible, it outflew and outfought every American plane it met. U.S. pilots called it the devil with wings. For months, the Zero's dominance was absolute. American squadrons were shot down in droves, and the myth of Japanese air superiority grew with every battle. But in war, legends are made to be broken. And sometimes, all it takes is a single twist of fate, a crash in a remote Alaskan bog, a daring test pilot, and a captured enemy plane to change the course of history. This is the story of how one test pilot's flight in a captured Zero unlocked its secrets, transformed the F6F Hellcat, and turned the tide of the air war in the Pacific. It's a story of innovation, courage, and the relentless pursuit of victory. Cut 2. Map of the Pacific, showing the spread of Japanese forces in 1942. Archival footage of burning ships at Pearl Harbor, the fall of the Philippines, and the desperate defense of Midway. The Zero's legend began in the skies over China, where it first proved its worth against Chinese and Soviet pilots. By the time the United States entered the war, the Zero was already feared and respected. Its lightweight design, powerful engine, and unmatched maneuverability made it a nightmare for Allied pilots. In the opening months of the Pacific War, the Zero swept all before it at Pearl Harbor, Wake Island, the Coral Sea, and Midway. American pilots quickly learned to dread the sight of the Zero's long, slender wings and rising sun insignia. In dogfights, the Zero could outturn, outclimb, and out-accelerate anything the U.S. Navy or Army Air Forces could put in the air. The losses mounted, and morale plummeted. The question on every pilot's mind was the same: how do you beat a plane that seems unbeatable? The answer, as it turned out, would come from the most unlikely of places, a remote island in the Aleutians, far from the main theaters of war. In June 1942, as the Battle of Midway raged to the south, a Japanese pilot named Tadayoshi Koga took off from the carrier Ryu on a mission to attack Dutch Harbor, Alaska. Koga was an experienced aviator, flying one of the Imperial Navy's prized Zeros. But fate had other plans. During the raid, Koga's plane was hit by ground fire, bleeding oil. He tried to make it back to his carrier, but the engine seized. With no other options, he crash-landed on Akutan Island, a desolate, windswept patch of tundra. Koga was killed in the landing, but his Zero survived damaged, but remarkably intact. For weeks, the wreck sat undisturbed, hidden by the fog and the remoteness of the island. Then, in July, a U.S. Navy PBY Catalina spotted the downed plane. A recovery team was dispatched, braving the treacherous terrain and unpredictable weather to reach the site. What they found was a prize beyond measure, a nearly complete, flyable Zero. The Akutan Zero, as it would come to be known, was carefully disassembled, loaded onto a ship, and transported to the Naval Air Station at North Island, San Diego. There, a team of engineers and mechanics worked around the clock to restore the plane to flying condition. Every bullet hole was patched, every system checked and rechecked. The goal was simple: to get the Zero back in the air, so that its secrets could be unlocked, enter Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders. A test pilot with nerves of steel and a reputation for pushing planes to their limits, Sanders was chosen to fly the captured Zero, to probe its strengths and weaknesses, and to report back to the Navy's top brass. It was a dangerous assignment. No one knew how the plane would handle, or if it would even fly at all. But Sanders was undaunted. On September 20, 1942, with a crowd of engineers, officers, and curious pilots watching, Sanders climbed into the cockpit of the Akutan Zero. He ran through the pre-flight checks, started the engine, and taxied to the runway. The moment of truth had arrived. The Zero lifted off smoothly, its engine humming with power. Sanders put the plane through its paces, climbing, diving, turning, rolling. He tested its limits, noting every quirk and characteristic. What he discovered would change the course of the war. The Zero, Sanders reported, was indeed a marvel of engineering. It could outturn any American fighter, climb like a homesick angel, and accelerate with breathtaking speed. But it had weaknesses, two weaknesses that could be exploited. The Zero's lightweight construction made it fragile. Its lack of armor and self-sealing fuel tanks meant that even a few hits could bring it down. And while it was unbeatable in a turning fight, it was sluggish in a dive and slow to roll at high speeds. Armed with this knowledge, Sanders and the Navy's top tacticians began to develop new strategies for fighting the Zero. The key was to avoid dogfights and instead use the strengths of American planes' speed, firepower, and diving ability to attack from above and escape before the Zero could react. The boom and zoom tactic was born. But the real revolution was yet to come. The lessons learned from the Akutan Zero would soon be put to use in the design and deployment of a new generation of American fighters, most notably the Grumman F6F Hellcat. The Grumman F6F Hellcat was already in development when the Akutan Zero was discovered, but the insights gained from test flights of the captured plane would shape the Hellcat as final form, and the tactics its pilots would use, and the design officers at Grumman. Engineers pored over the reports from Eddie Sanders and the Navy's test team. They studied every detail, the Zero's agility, its vulnerabilities, and the way it handled at the edge of its performance envelope. The Hellcat was built with these lessons in mind. It was heavier and more robust than the Zero, with thick armor plating to protect the pilot and self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent catastrophic fires. Its wings were designed for stability at high speeds, and its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine gave it the power to climb and dive with authority. The Hellcat was not meant to outturn the Zero, it was meant to outlast it, outgun it, and outthink it. As the first Hellcats rolled off the assembly lines and onto the decks of U.S. carriers, pilots were trained in the new tactics developed from the Akutan Zero's secrets. They were taught to avoid turning fights, to use their superior speed and firepower, and to strike from above whenever possible. The Thatch Weave, a defensive maneuver invented by Lieutenant Commander John Thatch, became standard practice. Two Hellcats would fly in a loose formation, ready to cover each other if a Zero tried to get on their tail. The maneuver exploited the Zero's slow roll rate and lack of armor, turning its strengths into weaknesses. The impact was immediate and dramatic. In the skies over the Pacific, the balance of power began to shift. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Hellcat pilots shot down hundreds of Japanese planes, many of them Zeros, with minimal losses. The kill ratio was staggering. For every Hellcat lost, 19 enemy aircraft were destroyed. The myth of the invincible Zero was shattered. But the story was not just about machines and tactics. It was about the men who flew them, the pilots who took the lessons of the Akutan Zero and turned them into victory. Men like David McCampbell, the Navy's top ace, who shot down 9 enemy planes in a single day, or Alex Vraciu, who became a legend for his daring attacks and coolness under fire. These pilots were not just warriors, they were students of their craft, constantly learning, adapting, and improving. The Hellcat quickly earned a reputation as a pilot's airplane. It was forgiving, rugged, and deadly in combat. Pilots praised its visibility, its firepower, and its ability to take punishment and bring them home. The stories spread through the fleet. Hellcat limping back to the carrier with half a wing shot off. Another landing safely after taking dozens of hits. The plane became a symbol of American resilience and ingenuity. Meanwhile, the Japanese struggled to adapt. Their pilots were brave and skilled, but they were hampered by outdated tactics and a lack of resources. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, was now outclassed by the Hellcat in almost every way. Japanese designers rushed to develop new fighters, but the industrial might of the United States meant that for every new Japanese plane, dozens of Hellcats took to the skies. The psychological impact was profound. American pilots, once fearful of the Zero, now hunted it with confidence. The tables had turned, and the hunter had become the hunted. The stories of Hellcat victories filled the newspapers back home, boosting morale and fueling the war effort. The legend of the 19-to-1 kill ratio became a rallying cry, a testament to the power of knowledge, innovation, and the courage of those who dared to fly. But the transformation was not just technical or tactical, it was cultural. The experience of flying and fighting in the Hellcat forged a new generation of American aviators, men who understood the value of teamwork, preparation, and adaptability. They learned to respect their enemy, to study his strengths and weaknesses, and to use every advantage at their disposal. The Akutan Zero, once a symbol of Japanese dominance, had become the key to its undoing. The test flights, the engineering reports, the new tactics, all of it came together in the Hellcat, a machine that embodied the lessons of hard-won experience. The result was not just a new airplane, but a new way of thinking about air combat. As the war raged on, the Hellcat's reputation grew. It became the backbone of the U.S. Navy's carrier air groups, flying in every major battle from the Gilberts to Okinawa. Its pilots racked up victories at an unprecedented rate, and the stories of their exploits became the stuff of legend. Yet, for all its success, the Hellcat's greatest legacy was the way it changed the course of the war. By turning the tables on the Zero, it gave the Allies control of the skies, paving the way for the island-hopping campaign that would bring them ever closer to Japan. The lessons learned from the Akutan Zero and the men who flew it would echo through the decades, shaping the future of aerial warfare. The story of the Hellcat's dominance in the Pacific is inseparable from the story of the men who flew it. For every statistic, every kill ratio, every sortie flown, there was a human story of courage, fear, and ingenuity. The pilots who climbed into the cockpits of the F6F Hellcat were young, often barely out of high school, and thrust into a world of danger and uncertainty. Yet, armed with the knowledge gleaned from the Akutan Zero, they faced their enemy with a new sense of confidence. Training for Hellcat pilots was rigorous and relentless. Instructors drilled the lessons learned from the captured Zero into every new recruit. Don't dogfight a Zero, they were told. Use your speed, your dive, your firepower. Hit hard, then get out. Simulated dogfights were staged, with instructors flying in ways that mimicked the Zero's strengths and weaknesses. Pilots practiced the thatch weave until it became second nature. learning to trust their wingman and to think in 3 dimensions. The camaraderie among Hellcat pilots was legendary. On the carriers, they lived together, trained together, and, all too often, mourned together. They shared stories of close calls and narrow escapes, of victories and losses. The bond between them was forged in the crucible of combat, and it was strengthened by the knowledge that their survival depended not just on their own skill, but on the teamwork and trust of the entire squadron. Combat in the Pacific was brutal and unforgiving. The distances were vast, the weather unpredictable, and the enemy determined. Pilots launched from the decks of carriers, often in rough seas. Knowing that a single mistake could mean a watery grave, they faced not just the Zero, but flak, kamikaze attacks, and the ever-present threat of running out of fuel far from home. Yet, time and again, the Hellcat proved its worth. In the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Hellcat pilots faced waves of Japanese aircraft in what would become one of the largest carrier battles in history. The sky was filled with the roar of engines and the staccato bursts of machine gun fire. Hellcats dove climbed and rode, using every tactic in the book to outmaneuver their foes. The result was a rout. More than 300 Japanese planes were shot down in a single day, while American losses were minimal. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot became a symbol of the Hellcat dominance and the effectiveness of the new tactics. The impact of these victories was felt far beyond the battlefield. News of the Hellcat's success spread quickly, boosting morale among American forces and striking fear into the hearts of the enemy. Japanese pilots, once supremely confident in their Zero, now faced an adversary that seemed to anticipate their every move. The psychological advantage shifted, and with it, the momentum of the war. But the cost was high. Many Hellcat pilots paid the ultimate price. Their planes lost to enemy fire, mechanical failure, or the unforgiving sea. Their sacrifice was honored by their comrades, who carried on the fight with renewed determination. The stories of these men of bravery, loss, and triumph became part of the legacy of the Hellcat and the war in the Pacific. The Akutan Zero, meanwhile, continued to play a role in the training of new pilots. The captured plane was flown in demonstrations, its capabilities showcased for aviators and engineers alike. Every detail was studied, every lesson absorbed. The Zero became both a symbol of the enemy's former power and a reminder of the importance of adaptation and learning. As the war drew closer to Japan, the Hellcat's role evolved. It became not just a fighter, but a versatile workhorse escorting bombers, strafing ground targets, and providing cover for amphibious landings. Its rugged design allowed it to absorb damage and keep flying, and its powerful armament made it a formidable opponent in any role. The Hellcat's adaptability was a testament to the foresight of its designers and the lessons learned from the Akutan Zero. The final months of the war saw the Hellcat at the forefront of the Allied advance. In the battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Hellcat squadrons provided air superiority, protecting the invasion forces from kamikaze attacks and enemy fighters. The skies were filled with the thunder of engines and the flash of gunfire, as the Hellcat continued to rack up victories. By the end of the war, the numbers told a staggering story. The F6F Hellcat had destroyed over 5,000 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter in the Pacific. Its kill ratio 19 enemy planes for every Hellcat lost was unmatched. The plane had become a legend, its name synonymous with victory. Yet, for the men who flew it, the true legacy of the Hellcat was not just in the numbers, but in the lessons learned and the bonds forged. They had taken the enemy's greatest weapon, studied it, and turned its secrets against it. They had adapted, innovated, and overcome. And in doing so, they had helped to win the war. As peace returned to the Pacific, the Hellcat pilots came home, some to parades and celebrations, others to quiet reflection. Many would go on to become leaders in aviation, engineering, and business, carrying with them the lessons of teamwork, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. The story of the Akutan Zero and the F6F Hellcat is a story of transformation, of how knowledge, courage, and innovation can turn the tide of battle. It is a story that continues to inspire, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, the seeds of victory can be found in the willingness to learn, to adapt, and to never give up. As the guns fell silent and the Pacific War drew to a close, the story of the Hellcat and the captured Zero became a legend among pilots and historians alike. The lessons learned from that single, battered Japanese fighter had rippled outward, shaping not only the outcome of the air war, but the very philosophy of American aviation for decades to come. In the months after VJ Day, the U.S. Navy took stock of its achievements. The F6F Hellcat had flown more than 66,000 combat sorties, destroyed over 5,000 enemy aircraft, and helped secure air superiority across the vast expanse of the Pacific. Its pilots had become some of the most experienced and respected aviators in the world. The 19-to-1 kill ratio was more than a statistic, it was a symbol of how knowledge, preparation, and adaptability could overcome even the most daunting challenges. The Akutan Zero, once a symbol of Japanese dominance, was now a prized artifact. It was displayed at airfields and museums, its story told to new generations of pilots. Engineers and tacticians continued to study its design, drawing lessons that would influence the next wave of American fighters. The Zero's legacy was not one of defeat, but of transformation, a reminder that even the most formidable adversary can become a teacher. For the men who had flown the Hellcat, the end of the war brought a mix of relief, pride, and reflection. Many returned home to families and futures they had only dreamed of during long nights at sea. Some struggled with the memories of combat, the loss of friends, and the weight of what they had seen and done. Yet, in reunions and letters, in memoirs and interviews, they spoke again and again of the moment everything changed, the day the Akutan Zero took flight under American hands. The impact of that moment extended far beyond the war. In the years that followed, the U.S. Navy and Air Force made it a priority to capture, test, and study enemy aircraft. The practice became standard in conflicts from Korea to Vietnam and beyond. The philosophy was simple: know your enemy, learn from him, and use that knowledge to gain the upper hand. The story of the Hellcat and the Zero became a case study in military academies, a lesson in the value of intelligence, innovation, and humility. The Hellcat itself became a symbol of American ingenuity. Its rugged design, powerful engine, and adaptability set the standard for carrier-based fighters. Pilots who had flown the Hellcat went on to shape the future of aviation, bringing their experience to the jet age and beyond. The camaraderie and teamwork forged in the crucible of war became the foundation for new squadrons, new missions, and new victories. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Hellcat and the Akutan Zero was the reminder that victory is never guaranteed. It must be earned through hard work, open minds, and the willingness to learn from both success and failure. The pilots who turned the tide of the Pacific War did so not just with superior machines, but with the courage to adapt, to question, and to grow. In the quiet moments after the war, Some of the men who had flown against the Zero found themselves reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had brought them victory. They remembered the fear and respect they had once felt for the Japanese fighter, the frustration of early defeats, and the exhilaration of finally turning the tables. They remembered the test flights, the briefings, the endless hours of training, and they remembered the friends they had lost along the way. The Akutan Zero, now weathered and worn, stood as a silent witness to all that had passed. Its story was told in hangars and classrooms, in books and documentaries. It became a symbol not just of war, but of the power of knowledge, the idea that understanding your enemy is the first step to overcoming him. As the years passed, the Hellcat faded from the front lines, replaced by faster, sleeker jets, but its legend endured. At airshows and museums, veterans would gather to share stories, to run their hands over the cool metal of the old fighter, and to remember the days when the fate of the world hung in the balance. They spoke of courage and loss, of innovation and teamwork, and of the moment when a single captured plane changed everything. The story of the Akutan Zero and the F6F Hellcat is more than a tale of machines and battles. It is a testament to the human spirit, the drive to learn, to adapt, and to prevail against the odds. It is a reminder that even in the darkest hours, hope can be found in the willingness to see things differently, to ask new questions, and to never stop striving for excellence. As the sun sets over the Pacific, the legacy of the Hellcat and the Zero lives on in the lessons taught to new generations, in the stories shared by those who were there, and in the enduring truth that knowledge, courage, and adaptability are the keys to victory.